He was just the janitor. That's what everyone thought. A mop in one hand, a tired look in his eyes, and a little girl waiting for him at home. But when he glanced at a whiteboard full of red error lines and formulas nobody could fix, he didn't walk away. He stepped forward. What he did next didn't just solve a crisis. It changed the future of AI, shook up an entire company, and rewrote his life in ways no one could have imagined. This isn't just a story about code. It's about seeing what others overlook and daring to believe you matter, even when the world says you done T.*3 days. 17 experts. 6 emergency meetings. $500,000 in consulting. Fees. And still, Mercer Dynamics had nothing but chaos on the screen. Inside the boardroom, the tension could be cut with a knife. Charts on the LED display bled with red errors. Lines of code flickered like a system trying to cry for help. Sloan Mercer stood at the head of the room. Her voice was cold and sharp. "You have 5 minutes. I want a solution, not another excuse." She turned, heels clicking once, and left. The glass door whispered shut behind her. Outside the boardroom, a janitor bent down to pick up a spilled soda can. He wore a gray uniform and earbuds. One dangled loose. His name tag read Gavin Brooks. He looked up. His eyes locked onto the formulas written on the board. Gavin was 36, a single dad, and worked the night shift. What no one in the building knew was that he had once studied advanced AI at MIT. He was top of his class until life threw him something harder than any algorithm: the sudden death of his wife and a little girl who needed him more than any degree ever could. Inside the boardroom, the lights were still on. The last team had left in silence. Gavin stepped in quietly. He leaned his mop against the wall. He walked to the board and scanned the chaos of numbers. He pulled out a rag to start wiping the board clean. But something stopped him. "Wait a second," he muttered. He tilted his head. Something in the math didn't feel right. Not wrong by textbook standards, wrong by instinct. They were applying a linear model to nonlinear behavior. A rookie mistake. One that could lead to disaster in a high training. Gavin grabbed a red marker. He didn't erase the board. Instead, he corrected it. A sigmoid curve here. 2 variables swapped there. 1 misweighted node underlined. He stepped back, arms crossed. "They're looking at it backwards," he whispered. A voice came from behind. "And you think you've got it right?" He turned. Sloan Mercer was standing at the door. CEO. Ice in her eyes. Power in her posture. "I wasn't trying to mess with anything," Gavin said quickly. "I just saw something off. You mop floors and fix $100 million algorithms? Not fix, just reframe. Like changing a dull knife for a sharper one. Same job, less damage." Sloan stepped forward. She pulled a tablet from her coat and entered the changes Gavin had drawn. 8 seconds passed. "Accuracy up by 18.4%, she said. "Error down by more than 60. She looked at him closely for the first time. Name? Gavin Brooks. Position? Janitor. 3 nights a week. Last education? MIT. Dropped out junior year. My wife died. I had to raise my daughter." She paused. "Do you understand what you've done?" "I wasn't trying to step on anyone's toes. I just saw what no one else did." Sloan nodded, almost to herself. "Be in conference room C tomorrow. 8 a.m. observer list." "I don't need to be in a meeting. I'm just—" That wasn't a suggestion. "Mr. Brooks." He blinked. "What about my daughter? She have snacks and zoo tickets if needed. She just needs one reason to believe her dad is someone to be proud of." At the door, Sloan turned once more. Her gaze softened slightly. After tonight, maybe he had finally given his daughter that reason. Gavin stood alone. He looked at the red scribbles on the whiteboard, then at his mop. Guess I owe you a raise, old friend. He didn't sleep much that night, not from nerves. His daughter Lena wouldn't go to bed until he told her the whole story. She just walked in. And you weren't scared? He brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. Sweetheart, when you've held your wife's hand in a hospital and told your daughter she can't ask for her anymore, CEOs don't scare you. Lena blinked. Then she smiled. Not the silly kind. The kind that says, I see you, Dad, she whispered. I think she likes you. Gavin laughed. He tucked her in and stared at the ceiling for a long time. By 7:50 the next morning, Gavin stood outside. Conference room C in his cleanest shirt. It still had a coffee stain near the hem. His old satchel hung over one shoulder. Inside were a pencil, a notepad, and a drawing Lena made. A stick figure with a mop in one hand and a lightning bolt in the other. Asterisk, asterisk, sometimes it only takes one person to change how a whole room listens. Gavin wasn't wearing a suit. He didn't have a degree on the wall. But when Sloan pointed to an empty chair and said, That's your seat, everything shifted. The engineers, the executives, the strategy, all of it now included someone who once pushed a mop bucket past their glass walls. What happened next wasn't just a meeting. It was the beginning of a quiet revolution. Asterisk, asterisk, inside the room, everyone buzzed around a large screen. Diagrams flashed on the walls. Charts and projections filled every inch of space. The room smelled like tension and peppermint breath mints. Then she walked in. Sloan Mercer. Everything shifted. People stood straighter. Voices dropped. The temperature in the room seemed to fall. She gave Gavin a short, direct look, then pointed. That's your seat. Gavin didn't ask. He just sat down. Let's begin, Sloan said, and just like that, the room clicked into focus. Yesterday, we saw a failure. A big one. One that almost cost us a multi-phase contract and exposed key flaws in our learning loop. She tapped her tablet. Gavin's red marker sketch appeared on the big screen. Last night, someone gave us a gift. There was a murmur. Heads turned toward Gavin, and away just as fast. This adjustment dropped our training error by 60%, reduced latency by 22 milliseconds. And it showed us something important. She paused. That expertise doesn't always look how we expect. Silence. A hand rose. Jason Marlowe. Senior engineer, MBA from Stanford. Perfect tie. A look that said he didn't like surprises. With all due respect, Jason began, the words people use before they disrespect you. How do we know this isn't just luck? Run the model, Sloan replied. Jason hesitated, then entered the new parameters. The system ran. Smooth. No overfitting. The data lined up. Clean. Still could be luck, Jason muttered. Gavin spoke for the first time. Calm, steady. Maybe. But if it is, I hope we're smart enough to learn from luck when it walks in holding a mop. A few chuckles floated around the room. Sloan didn't laugh, but she gave a slight nod. The kind a judge gives when something unexpected makes sense. After the meeting, she caught up with him near the elevator. You held your own, she said. I wasn't trying to. That's why it worked. They rode down in silence. Then she asked, Do you always think in metaphors? I fix things, Gavin replied. I explain stuff to my daughter like she's 6, not 60. So I compare tech to plumbing or baking. It sticks better that way. She raised an eyebrow. Useful. He looked at her. Asterisk. Do you always talk like you're giving orders in court? She was quiet for a beat. I manage what I can, especially conversations. When they stepped into the lobby, she added flatly, I don't do casual, Mr. Brooks. Gavin smiled. Then I might be your worst nightmare. Maybe, she said. But you solved a nightmare last night. That afternoon, Gavin went back to work. Back to his uniform. Back to his mob. But people saw him differently. Interns nodded. Engineers said hello. One even said, nice work, without sarcasm. And at home, Lena had drawn a new picture. It was Gavin, and a tall woman in a black suit, standing side by side. The caption said, Bad plus lightning lady equals best team. Back in her office, Sloane stood alone. She looked out over the city. Rain was coming. She didn't mind. She pulled up Gavin's simulation again. Watched the smooth curve appear. Over and over. No degree. No fancy title. Still, she whispered, he changed everything. A knock on her door. Arthur, her CTO, mid-50s, honest, sharp. That janitor's got people talking. Let them. You think he's got more in him? I know he does. Asterisk, you're considering giving him access? I'm considering listening more carefully to voices that don't come from boardrooms. Arthur raised an eyebrow. You've changed. He made the system better. Arthur shook his head. No. He made you better. She didn't answer. Just stared at the glowing screen. The rain began to trace soft lines down the glass. And for the first time in years, Sloane didn't feel the need to fix anything. Not right away. Change doesn't always come with a title. Sometimes it shows up with a bucket in one hand and a daughter's drawing in the other. Gavin didn't ask for recognition. He never even asked to be seen. But Mercer Dynamics had started shifting. Not because someone told them to, but because someone finally reminded them what quiet brilliance looks like. Until the silence around him started to grow louder than applause. Asterisk. Asterisk. The invitation didn't come to Gavin's inbox. It came through. HR printed. Hand-delivered. The woman looked confused, handing it to him. You've been requested for the executive strategy meeting. Tomorrow. 10 sharp. Gavin looked up from his mop bucket. Are you sure that's not for someone else? Name says Gavin Brooks. Title says janitor. She paused. Also says guest contributor. Technical observation role. Whatever that means. Gavin raised an eyebrow. It means they're out of ideas. She smirked. But there was something else in her eyes, too. Curiosity. Maybe even hope. That night, he didn't go home. He went to the 24-hour laundromat, washed his only 2 dress shirts, leaned against the dryer, flipping through an old notebook filled with scribbles, ideas, and silly sketches Lena had drawn. You think this is a good idea? He whispered to no one. In his head, he heard his late wife's voice. You overthink everything. Just be the guy who listens. That's the guy people trust. By morning, he was tired, but ready. The strategy room sat on the top floor. Glass everywhere. A view that made normal people feel small. Gavin stood out. No lanyard. No fancy blazer. Just a clean shirt. Lena's lucky stone in his pocket. And a notepad he hadn't opened since she lost her first tooth. A man with perfect teeth and a tie too tight sneered. Is this the janitor? You can say Gavin, he replied. Or guest contributor, whichever is easier. Sloane walked in, catching the last part. He's here because none of you solved the neural lag issue, she said. But he did. So he's earned that seat. That shut the room up. The meeting lasted 90 minutes. Gavin didn't speak much. But when he did, the room listened. No jargon. No big words, just truth. Think of your I like a single parent juggling 3 jobs, he said once. You're asking it to adjust without letting it understand why. Someone laughed. Another muttered, that's actually true. Jason, the senior engineer, didn't laugh. He tried not to show his irritation. I'm just wondering if we're basing our roadmap on bedtime stories now. Gavin looked at him. You ever raised a kid, Jason? No. Then don't knock bedtime. That's where real learning happens. That got more laughs than Jason expected. and more nods than Gavin thought he'd ever earn. After the meeting, Gavin stepped into the hallway and exhaled. Sloane followed. 2 takeaway coffees in hand. "I didn't think you were a performer," she said, handing him one. "I'm not. I've just been underestimated long enough to know how to play along. That bedtime line wasn't just a line, was it? It's my life." They walked in silence for a moment. This time, the silence felt different. Less like a wall, more like space held open on purpose. "Why didn't you go back to engineering?" she asked. "Because MIT doesn't hand out scholarships to widowed dads packing lunch at 5 a.m. But you could have reapplied." "I didn't want to rebuild my life. I wanted to build hers first." Sloane stopped walking. "You talk like someone who doesn't realize how rare that is. Or maybe like someone too tired to care how rare it is." She looked at him then. Really looked. Her voice softened. "Maybe it's time you stop being the guy who makes things easier for everyone else, and let someone build something for you." Gavin didn't answer, but his silence wasn't rejection. It was unfamiliar ground. Later, at home, Lena was waiting by the door. Shoebox in hand. "How was it?" she asked. Fancy people saying words that didn't mean much until bedtime stories came up. "You used the dad analogy?" "Sure did. And no one booed?" "Not even a little." She grinned and opened the shoebox. Inside was a sandwich, 2 stickers, and a folded piece of paper. "I made you a new business card," she said. It read, "Gavin Brooks, fixer of things, solver of grown-up problems, full-time dad. You forgot mop operator," he teased. "I upgraded you." Meanwhile, across town, Jason stood in Sloane's office. "You're moving too fast with him." "No," Sloane replied. "I'm recognizing value. He doesn't understand corporate structure. He has no credentials." "Neither did Steve Jobs." Jason clenched his jaw. "What's really going on here, Sloane? Are you chasing talent or something else?" She didn't flinch. "Let me ask you something, Jason. When's the last time you surprised yourself?" Jason said nothing. "He does that every day," she added, "and doesn't even call it ambition. He calls it surviving. Asterisk, asterisk. Sometimes the hardest part isn't proving your worth. It's watching people look away once you do." Gavin stepped into rooms he was never invited to, and left them better than he found them. But when the applause faded and the truth got uncomfortable, the quiet returned. Only this time, it wasn't peaceful. It was cold. Asterisk, asterisk. It started with a voicemail. Gavin played it 3 times to make sure it was real. "Mr. Brooks, this is Cecilia from the executive office. Ms. Mercer asked me to extend a personal invitation. Tonight, 7 p.m. private dinner. Not business. No tie required. Not business?" He stared at the phone, waiting for it to explain itself. Phones don't do that. Especially not when the woman involved is Sloane Mercer. He found the restaurant just before 7 o'clock. A quiet place tucked between a flower shop and a boutique hotel. The kind of spot where the chairs didn't match on purpose. Sloane was already there, sitting by the window. Her hair was down for the first time. No armor. No corporate shield. Just her. Gavin stepped inside, suddenly aware of his scuffed boots and his one decent shirt. "You clean up well," she said with a soft smile. "I only own one not terrible shirt. You're looking at it." "Then we're both overdressed," she said, "for not a date." They sat. For a while, neither spoke. Jazz played in the background. The scent of rosemary bread filled the space. Finally, Sloane broke the silence. "You know why I asked you here? Because you enjoy watching underqualified men panic over wine lists?" She smirked. "No, because I haven't had a real conversation in years. Not one that wasn't about quarterly numbers or lawsuits." "You mean no one ever asks how your day is?" "They ask. But what they really want to know is how my performance affects theirs." She looked away. "I eat lunch at my desk." I sign more NDAs than birthday cards. Some days, I forget what my own voice sounds like, unless it's giving instructions. Gavin leaned in. You need to fire your calendar. I tried that. My therapist quit after 2 sessions. Sighed I made him anxious. Gavin laughed. A full, real laugh. The kind that caught her by surprise. She laughed too, not loudly, but honestly. There it is, he said. What? The human part of the glacier. She tilted her head, amused. You always talk like this? Only when I'm too tired to pretend I belong here. Their food came. Neither of them could pronounce the dishes. But for once, it didn't matter. Sloane ate slowly. Gavin listened without interrupting. They talked about childhood, about how one day you realize your parents are just people, about favorite books, bad movie endings, loss. I still hear her voice sometimes, Gavin said quietly. Not when I'm thinking, when I'm not. Like when Lena falls asleep in the car, or when I smell cinnamon on cold mornings. Your wife? He nodded, double quotes. How long's it been? 6 years. You speak like she's still close. She is. Just not in the way I want. Sloane didn't respond right away. My mother was all ambition, she said finally. She told me to rule the world by never letting anyone too close. Said emotion was weakness in a suit. And you believed her? For longer than I should have. They sat in quiet again. Gavin pulled out a small, folded paper from his pocket. Lena's drawing. She drew this after I spoke in that boardroom, he said. A stick figure with wild hair, holding hands with a tall woman in heels. A tiny mop in the background. A laptop nearby. A son in the corner. She said I looked like someone who fixes broken machines and broken hearts. With the same toolbox. Sloane stared at the picture longer than he expected. You know, she said softly, I've signed $1 million deals. Launched products in 5 countries. Stood on stages in front of men who earn more in a year than I'll ever spend. But nothing has made me feel more seen than this crayon sketch from a little girl I've never met. They left the restaurant after 10 o'clock. The air outside was crisp. Sloane stopped beside Gavin's truck. You still drive this thing? It runs. It's paid off. That's rare. She leaned against the door. You're a strange man, Gavin Brooks. Coming from you, I'll take that as a compliment. He opened his door, then paused. Why'd you really ask me here, Sloane? She looked at him. Because I needed to remember what truth sounds like. And you don't perform. You just show up. He nodded. That was enough. See you at work. Gavin? He turned back. I like bedtime stories. And with that, she disappeared into the night. Her heels clicking like punctuation at the end of a sentence neither of them wanted to stop writing. Success makes noise, but so does jealousy. Gavin didn't ask for a seat at the table. He earned it. Yet as he rose, the smiles got tighter and the handshakes started to vanish. The system wasn't broken by his presence. It was exposed. And for people who built their pride on being the smartest in the room, that was more terrifying than failure. Asterisk. The next morning started like any other. Gavin dropped Lena off at school. She hugged him tighter than usual. You're shining, Daddy, she whispered. People are starting to see it. He smiled all the way to work. Until he stepped inside Mercer Dynamics. Something felt off, not in temperature. In energy. The hallway felt colder. Faces didn't turn his way like before. Smiles were missing. Conversation stopped when he entered a room. As he reached for his ID badge, a security guard stopped him. Sorry, sir. You've been moved off the janitorial roster. What? Your clearance is now executive access. CTO's orders. Guess you've been promoted. The words felt more like a warning and a welcome. In the elevator, Jason Marlowe stood waiting. Tie straight, jaw tight. New title? He asked, not smiling. I didn't realize there was one. Oh, there is. Special technical advisor to the CEO. Must be nice. Skipping the ladder. I didn't skip anything, Gavin said calmly. I've been climbing for years. Just on a staircase, no one cared to notice. Jason stepped closer. Let me give you some advice, Mop Man. These people smile because Sloan tells them to, but they're not your friends. You don't belong here. Gavin met his eyes. If I waited to belong, my daughter would still be hungry. I didn't come here to be liked. I came to build something that works. Later that morning, the strategy team met. They reviewed Gavin's latest optimization for the autonomous response model. His code was clean. His logic held up. Still, the room sat frozen. Jason was the first to speak. We ran the numbers. The math checks out, but we're not implementing it. Sloan looked up sharply. Excuse me? It's untested. There's no precedent. It's risky to use code from someone who doesn't even have a degree. You're saying the solution works, but the resume doesn't? Jason didn't flinch. We're a billion-dollar company. Our clients don't want janitor genius headlines. They want legacy, stability. The room nodded slowly. Some agreed. Some didn't. But no one spoke up. Gavin stayed silent, watching, listening, like a man who's seen storms before and knows when one is coming. Sloan's eyes found his. Gavin, do you want to respond? He leaned forward, his voice calm. I get it. I'm not what you expected. And maybe that's uncomfortable. But if the numbers work and the system gets better, then who's really being unprofessional? The man solving the problem, or the team ignoring the answer? He looked around. If I came in wearing a $1,000 blazer with a Stanford degree, you'd call this innovation. But because I smell like bleach and carry my daughter's sticker on my laptop, I'm a liability? He paused. If a man's value is measured by how expensive his mistakes are, maybe we need to measure value differently. Silence. Then Sloan stood up. Slowly. We'll implement the update. Jason didn't argue, not out loud. But his glare spoke volumes. That afternoon, Gavin found Sloan on the rooftop balcony. She was staring at the skyline. Jacket off. Arms crossed. Tough room, he said gently. They're used to predictable outcomes. You're not. No. I'm used to excellence. No matter where it hides. They stood together quietly for a moment. Then Gavin asked, Why are you fighting for me? She turned to face him. Because you remind me of something I used to believe in. Before. I traded it for board seats and branding guides. What's that? That brilliance doesn't need permission. Gavin smiled slightly. That's a nice idea. Dangerous in the wrong hands. So is silence. But silence was exactly what followed in the days ahead. Gavin noticed it everywhere. Fewer people nodded. Engineers stopped asking for help. Slack threads he used to be tagged in went quiet. Only Arthur, the CTO, stayed the same. One night, Gavin sat alone in the break room, reviewing code. Arthur walked in, 2 cups of black coffee in hand. He sat down next to him. You rattled them. I didn't mean to. You didn't have to. You just exist. That's the threat. Gavin looked tired. Feels like I'm being pushed out of a room I never asked to be in. Arthur nodded. That's because you're not playing their game. You're playing life. And life scares the hell out of people who've never had to survive it. Gavin looked down at Lena's drawing. Creased, but still in his pocket. I'm doing it for her. Arthur patted his back. Then you're already winning. Asterisk, asterisk, truth doesn't always echo in boardrooms. Sometimes it whispers from the living room floor, over puzzle pieces and leftover stew. Gavin didn't rise for applause. He rose for bedtime stories, for quiet lessons, tucked between questions from a 6-year-old. But the world outside didn't care about that. And soon, the silence in the hallways wasn't just cold. It was empty. Asterisk, asterisk, that night, back home, Lena sat on the couch working on a puzzle. Gavin reheated. Leftover stew. Did they like your new idea, Daddy? Some did. Some not so much. But you told the truth, right? I did. Then you did your job. He smiled and sat beside her. She placed a sky blue piece into place. What if people don't like me for doing the right thing? She asked. Then you find people who do. Simple, she said, wise beyond her years. He kissed her forehead. You ever think about running the company one day? Only if it comes with free popsicles. I'll write that into the contract. They both laughed. It was soft, ordinary, imperfect, and in that moment, Gavin remembered exactly why he had started this path. Not for titles, not for approval, but to build a world where his daughter wouldn't have to beg to be seen. In Mercer Dynamics. Sloane passed the janitor's closet without noticing. The mop bucket was gone. She barely registered it. Meetings came and went. Deadlines, investor calls, numbers, presentations. But by the third day, a strange kind of silence crept in. A kind she couldn't explain. Gavin Brooks was gone. No official memo. No announcement. Just gone. His name was removed from the Slack channels. Someone else was now listed for nightly code cleanup. But the new person didn't see logic the way Gavin did. Didn't spot patterns the way Gavin did. The AI models started drifting again. Only slightly. But enough. No one mentioned his name. Except her. Sloane stood in the observation deck, watching the lab floor below. Monitors blinked. Soft chatter rose up from the teams. But something was missing. She found herself looking at the corner, where Gavin used to stand. Hands in his pockets, head tilted. Eyes scanning code like he could read its heartbeat. Now, just an empty spot. A cleaner walked by. Silent. Didn't stop. Didn't glance at the board. Of course not. He was just there to clean. Just like Gavin was, until he wasn't. That night, Sloane sat in her office. Everything looked perfect. Like always, except for a faint brown stain near the edge of her desk. Coffee spill. From Gavin's first meeting. He had placed his thermos down, noticed the leak, and said, "Sorry, this thing leaks hope and caffeine." She hadn't laughed then, but now she didn't want that stain wiped away. Everyone else had gone home, but she stayed, wandering the halls like a stranger in her own company. In the break room, the lights were dim, chairs were stacked, but something on the corkboard by the door caught her eye. A tiny envelope, pinned between flyers and shift schedules. Her name written in uneven purple crayon. To Miss Mercer. From Lena Brooks. She stared at it, not sure whether to smile or break. She took it down. Gently. Inside was a folded paper with stars drawn in every corner. In the middle, written carefully. Thank you for believing in my dad. He used to smile when he talked about you. Now he doesn't smile much. But I still do. Lena, age 6 3/4. Sloane sat down beside the vending machine, took off her heels, folded her legs underneath her like a kid. And cried. For the first time in months. The next morning, she didn't tell anyone where she was going. No driver. No assistant. Just her black coat, a scarf, and Lena's letter in her pocket, like a compass. She found Gavin's apartment after circling the neighborhood. Twice. The steps creaked. The hallway smelled like curry and rainwater. She knocked. The door opened. Lena stood there. Glittery unicorn shirt, mismatched socks, hair clipped with a paperclip. You're the lady from work, she said flatly. The one who makes Daddy nervous. Sloane blinked. I probably am. You want to come in? We don't have guest chairs, but we have floor. Inside, the apartment was small, full of toys, folded laundry, books on engineering, a blinking old laptop. Daddy's out, looking for jobs. He doesn't think he'll find one. But I told him the sun doesn't ask permission to rise. Did you hear that on a cartoon? No. From Daddy. Lena pulled out a box of Legos. You can help. I only let people I trust build the roof. Sloane hesitated. Then sat down. The blocks didn't match. The colors were off, but Lena's hands moved with confidence. A little house began to take shape. He left because he thought he embarrassed you, Lena said suddenly. People laughed online. I think it hurt. It wasn't his fault, Sloane replied softly, and it didn't embarrass me. It reminded me what matters. Do you miss him? Sloane exhaled. Yes. And I didn't expect to. Lena handed her a green block. If you make him smile again, I'll forgive you. Sloane held back a laugh. She wiped the corner of her eye. Heal. Forgiveness doesn't always need an apology. Sometimes it just needs a small hand offering a Lego block and a second chance wrapped in a child's voice. Sloane had led boardrooms and conquered industries, but nothing had ever humbled her like a 6-year-old girl who still believed her father could light up a room if someone just remembered to invite him back in. Asterisk later, standing by the door, Sloane hesitated. Can I leave a message for your dad? Lena pointed to the kitchen counter. Sticky notes are over there. Blue ones are for regular stuff. Pink ones are for important feelings. Sloane picked a pink one. She wrote only 5 words. We never got to finish. Then underlined it and added her initials. SM. That night, Gavin came home to find Lena asleep on the couch. The Lego house she built sat balanced on her stomach, like a prize. He smiled. Then he saw the note. He picked it up. Read it once. Then again. He looked at Lena. She was still smiling in her sleep. And for the first time in days. So did he. The sun had barely risen when Sloane stepped off the subway. The next morning, no driver. No assistant. Just her breath, the cold, and a folded pink sticky note in her coat pocket. The streets smelled of roasted peanuts and wet laundry. The buildings leaned with age. She felt out of place in her clean coat and expensive shoes. But she didn't turn back. Apartment 3B sat at the end of a hallway that echoed every footstep. She knocked twice. This time, the door opened faster. Lena beamed. You came back. I said I would. Daddy's not home. He's at the place with the slow computers and the grumpy man. You want to come in anyway? Sloane hesitated. Then Lena tugged her sleeve gently. The decision was made. We're making pancakes. Today, Lena declared. From scratch. From scratch? Yeah. I ran out of scratch, though. I think it's like sugar. Or magic. I'm still investigating. Sloane laughed, a real laugh. The kind she hadn't heard from herself in a long time. May I sit? You can sit anywhere that's not sticky, Lena said seriously. I suggest the beanbag. It's only mildly suspicious. Sloane sank into the beanbag chair, surprisingly comfortable, considering it looked like it had been through a pillow war. Her eyes scanned the room. Children's books on shelves. A robot made from soda cans. A cardboard box labeled Important Inventions in crayon. But it was the wall by the window that made her breath catch. A photo collage. Lena and Gavin at the park, holding a science fair trophy. One of them at a hospital. And in the middle, a woman with kind eyes, soft smile, and the same curls as Lena. That's Mommy, Lena said quietly, noticing her gaze. She died when I was 3, but Daddy still talks to her sometimes. When he thinks I'm sleeping. Sloane's voice caught. She looks gentle. She was. Daddy said she loved 3 things. Rainstorms, old poetry, and the way he made scrambled eggs. That's a good list. He stopped making eggs when she died, Lena said matter-of-factly. But he started making robots, and games, and bedtime stories with maps in them. Sloane blinked back something, rising in her throat. He told me once, when someone's heart breaks, you either let it stay broken or build something beautiful from the pieces. He really said that? Yep, right after we accidentally set the toaster on fire. It was a very emotional morning. Sloane smiled, folded her hands tightly in her lap. Lena, she asked gently, do you know why your dad left the company? Lena nodded. He thought he made people uncomfortable. That people didn't want a janitor who was smart. That they'd never see the difference between being out of place and being brilliant. The words hit hard, clear, sharp, unavoidable. He always says, sometimes people get scared when the wrong person turns out to be right. Sloane leaned forward. You talk like someone twice your age. That's because I borrow Daddy's heart sometimes. His is extra big, but it gets tired. The room went quiet. Sloane reached into her coat pocket. Can I give you something? Lena nodded. Inside the small box was a USB drive tied with a purple ribbon. It's a game, Sloane said. Your dad helped design the core mechanic. It's not public. Yet, I thought you should be the first to test it. Lena's eyes lit up. Does it have dragons? Sort of. Dragons that don't know they're dragons. They think they're pigeons. Until they fly too far and find out they breathe fire. Lena gasped. That's awesome. She hugged the box like it held treasure. Miss Sloane? Yes. If you make Daddy smile. Again, I'll forgive you. Sloane couldn't speak. She simply nodded. A silent promise. And as she walked down the hallway toward the cold street, something in the air shifted. Less like distance. More like a road being rebuilt. Second chances. Don't knock. They walk in, unannounced, unpolished, and holding a folder in their hand. When Gavin saw Sloane standing in the hallway of his daughter's school, he didn't see a CEO. He saw the beginning of something he thought he'd lost, the chance to be heard again, not for where he came from, but for what he could still become. Gavin didn't expect to see her again. Not like this. Not standing in the hallway of Lena's school. Not with her arms crossed and a folder in hand. Not with that same steady calm in her eyes, the kind that once silenced a room full of investors. But there she was. Waiting. You came all this way, he said, adjusting the strap of his satchel. I needed to see you in person. Most CEOs just send an email. Most janitors don't fix neurologic trees with a red marker. Gavin looked away, a smile tugging at the edge of his mouth. So what now? You want me to mop up the next crisis too? No, she said firmly. I want you to present at the Investor Summit. Silence. The kind that feels heavy. Gavin blinked. You want me to what? Take the stage. Explain the algorithm changes you inspired. Walk them through the simplified AI learning loop. Gavin shook his head slowly. Sloane, I don't do suits. Or microphones. Or rooms with 500 people and only one fire exit. You don't need a suit or a script. You just need truth. And you already have that. They'll see me, the guy who cleaned floors. Good, she said. Maybe that's who they need to see. She stepped closer. When you talk, people listen. Not because you demand it, but because you've lived what we only model in code. Gavin ran a hand through his hair. Why me? Because I forgot what this company was built on, she said softly. Not polish, not projections, people. And if it all goes wrong, then it goes wrong with your name, not mine. That stopped him. You're putting your neck on the line for me? No, I'm standing beside you while you put yours out for something you already helped build. He stared at her for a long second, then nodded. One condition. Name it. No teleprompters. No handlers. No voice in my ear telling me how to sound smarter. Deal. And one more thing. Yes? Don't disappear again. Not from me. Not from Lena. Something shifted in her expression. Warmer. Still guarded, but softer. I wasn't planning to. 2 days later, the Mercer Dynamics Investor Summit opened in the Grand Pacific Auditorium. Backstage, Gavin stood frozen in place, hands sweaty, clean shirt, slightly wrinkled, untucked, just like Lena insisted. You look like a magician, she had said that morning. A really nervous one. The room beyond the curtain buzzed. Hundreds of seats. Camera. Crews. Whispers. Pressure. Gavin peeked through the curtain and saw Sloan. Standing in the back. Not seated. Hands clasped. Steady gaze. Not cold this time. Just hopeful. He took a breath. Just a room, he whispered to himself. A really expensive one. With too many opinions. The host's voice echoed through the ballroom. And now, a voice you haven't heard before, but one you'll be glad you did. Please welcome Gavin Brooks. A murmur rippled across the room. Wait, the janitor? Gavin stepped into the spotlight. No slides. No flashy animations. Just him. Mic and a single image behind him. A blank screen. He adjusted the mic, looked around. I was supposed to clean this room tonight, he said quietly. The audience went still. I almost didn't show up. Not because I was afraid to speak, but because I was afraid to be seen. Pause. 6 weeks ago, I was sweeping floors at Mercer Dynamics. Tonight, I'm here because someone forgot to erase a whiteboard, and I saw something they didn't. He pointed to the screen. That's how most people see men like me. Blank, replaceable. He clicked once. A crude sketch of a neural network appeared. Hand-drawn. But what if the solution isn't hidden in the data, or the degrees, or the corner offices? What if it's in the people we stopped listening to? He began walking slowly. Calm, clear. I'm not a genius. I dropped out of MIT to raise a daughter who believes dragons are just shy pigeons. A few quiet laughs. But I've spent the last few years watching how the world works when no one's watching back. And here's what I've learned. Another click. A stick figure with a mop stood beside a machine labeled AI loop. Machines learn like children, with trial, with error, with patience, with trust. If a janitor can fix a learning loop, maybe it was never broken. Maybe we just built it to ignore the wrong kind of voice. For a long beat, no one moved. Then a woman in a red blazer stood clapping then another, until the entire room was on its feet. Not for the chart, not for the tech but for something much harder to earn. Truth. Asterisk. The crowd stood for the janitor. Not because he had the best pitch or wore the finest suit, but because, in a room full of power, he had something they didn't. Honesty. Gavin didn't perform. He showed up. And sometimes, that's all it takes to wake a sleeping world. Backstage, Gavin stepped into the shadows, his heart pounding in a rhythm. He didn't recognize It wasn't fear. It was relief. And maybe something else. Arthur Feldman, the board chairman, approached with a rare smile. Mr. Brooks, he said, offering his hand. That was one hell of a presentation. Gavin shook it, unsure. Thank you, sir. You're not the janitor anymore. Effective immediately, we'd like to bring you in as lead innovation advisor. Gavin blinked. I don't know what to say. Arthur grinned. Then don't say anything. Just don't stop doing what you're doing. He disappeared into the crowd, leaving Gavin stunned. Sloan stood waiting in the hallway. Quiet. Still. Gavin walked toward her slowly. So, I'm guessing that went better than expected? You made a ballroom full of millionaires question their own egos, she said softly. Not bad for a night's work. I didn't do it alone. He looked past her. Lena had fallen asleep on a velvet bench backstage. One hand clutched the tiny game cartridge she had promised to test after Daddy's scary speech. I said a lot out there, Gavin continued, but the only words that mattered were the ones I didn't get to say. Like, thank you for showing up, for seeing me, for not running when it got uncomfortable. Sloane's voice trembled slightly. I don't run anymore. I just circle the block a few times before I knock. Gavin smiled. You know, I thought I was doing all this for Lena, to give her something better. And now? Now I think she gave me something better. A reason to stop hiding behind good enough. A reason to try again. Sloane nodded. And asked quietly, what happens next? Next? He looked at Lena, then back at Sloane. We go home. Read a bedtime story. Try not to burn the eggs in the morning. He looked at her a little longer. And maybe, if you're not too busy saving the company, you join us for pancakes. Sloane raised an eyebrow. You cook terribly, but I serve with style. She smiled, soft, honest. Then it's a date. A breakfast. He corrected with a laugh. Don't get carried away. One step at a time, Mercer. That night, back at the apartment, Gavin sat on the edge of the couch. Lena was curled against his side. The city outside glowed in gold and violet. Hughes. His phone buzzed once. An email. Subject. Welcome to the leadership team. He stared at the screen. But it wasn't the job title that stuck with him. It was the quiet truth behind it. He wasn't a man behind the mop anymore. He was the man who had learned how to be seen without changing who he was. And somewhere between the mop and the mic, he had found his voice. The boardroom was empty now. No spotlights. No suits. Just silence. Gavin stood by the window, a lukewarm cup of coffee in his hand. The city below buzzed, as if nothing had changed. But everything had. Behind him, the door opened. Sloane stepped in, still wearing the black blazer from the presentation. It looked different now, looser, like something had finally let go inside her. Didn't expect you to still be here, she said gently. Didn't expect to feel like I belonged here, he replied. They didn't speak for a moment. It wasn't awkward. Just full. She walked toward the other end of the room and sat at the head of the glass table. You were brilliant today, she said. I didn't memorize a word of it. That's what made it brilliant. He smiled and finally turned to face her. So why do I still feel like I'll wake up tomorrow wearing my old uniform? Because people like you don't come from a world where dreams feel safe, she said quietly. We build, we protect, but we rarely receive. He watched her. You included. Especially me. She stood, walked closer, stopped a few feet away. You once asked me why I came back to see you. Why I didn't let the story fade. Yeah, it wasn't for PR or strategy or even the algorithm. She looked down at her hands, uncertain, vulnerable. I came back because you made me feel something I hadn't felt in years. Gavin didn't speak. He just waited. I've always been the smartest in the room, but I've never felt less alone than when you stood in it with me. Asterisk, some truths don't need applause. They just need a quiet room, 2 tired hearts, and enough courage to admit that not everything valuable can be measured in lines of code. Sloane had built empires by avoiding vulnerability. But here, in the same boardroom where everything began, she realized something powerful. This time, she didn't want to win. She wanted to stay. Asterisk. Sloane looked up at him slowly. It wasn't just how you saw the code, she continued. It was how you saw the world, like broken things weren't meant to be discarded, but repaired. Gavin nodded. That's probably because I'm made of broken pieces. Exactly, she whispered. She stepped closer. Do you know what it's like to spend your whole life being the smartest person in the room and still feel completely alone in it? He nodded gently. Do you know what it's like to hold back good news because there's no one to share it with? I do, he said softly. Every time I brought Lena home a drawing from work, she'd clap like I just cured cancer. Sloane laughed, full and unguarded. Then quieter. You scare me, Gavin. That caught him off guard. Why? Because you're not trying to impress me, or fix me, or chase something. I'm just here. Exactly. And I don't know how to stand still for that. Neither of them moved. City lights blinked softly outside. Then Gavin spoke. You know what I realized tonight? Tell me. That love doesn't always come wrapped in declarations and grand gestures. Sometimes it shows up as a woman walking into a janitor's hallway and asking hard questions. She smiled and covered her mouth for a moment. I'm not great with subtlety. Good. I'm terrible at guessing games. He stepped closer. I think I've been falling for you since you didn't erase the red marker I left on that board. And I think I've been falling for you since you didn't apologize for writing on it. They didn't rush. No fireworks. Just a moment. Just truth. Their foreheads met, eyes closed, breathing the same still air. Then she whispered, Can I ask you something? Anything. Do you think it's possible to build something real out of something that started by accident? He leaned back slightly to look at her. Some of the best stories start when someone walks into the wrong room. You think this is a story? No, he said softly. I think it's a chapter we almost didn't get to write. She closed her eyes and let that settle, then opened them again. Promise me something. Name it. If I fall apart again, remind me who I really am. Only if you promise to remind me who I've become when I forget. She nodded, double quotes deal. They didn't kiss. Not yet. Instead, they sat on the floor, backs against the glass wall, knees up, side by side, like two kids watching stars through an office window. This room's too fancy, Gavin muttered. We can change that. How? Bring in more broken pieces, more truth, more coffee stains. Only if you brew it, he said. She looked at him. You're not what I expected. Neither are you. That's probably why this works. Probably. They sat in comfortable silence. Then Gavin whispered almost to himself, I don't want this to be a footnote. It won't be. And I don't want Lena growing up thinking people like me don't get to write endings. Then let's give her a new one. Later that night, Gavin returned home. Lena was still awake, curled under a blanket fort, flashlight in one hand, half-eaten banana in the off. Other. She blinked at him. Did you tell her? Tell her what? That you like her. Like her? Gavin laughed. Yeah, I think she figured it out. Did she like you back? It's looking promising. Lena grinned and turned off her flashlight. Good. I was worried you'd mess it up. Thanks for the vote of confidence, kiddo. You're welcome. She yawned. And don't burn the pancakes tomorrow. She might come over. He chuckled, kissed her forehead, and tucked the blanket tighter around her shoulders, then turned off the lights. For the first time in a long time, Gavin didn't feel like he was cleaning up after someone else's mess. He felt like he was finally building something of his own. Asterisk. Some mornings don't need alarms or to-do lists. They just need cinnamon toast, coffee made too strong, and the sound of a little girl's laughter. Gavin didn't need more success. What he needed was this, a Sunday where nothing was broken. Nothing needed fixing, and everything that mattered fit in one tiny apartment. Sunday mornings in Gavin's apartment were sacred. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon toast and slightly burnt coffee, the kind made too strong and poured too fast. Window was cracked open just enough to let in the city's hum. Like bells rang in the distance. Someone down the hall was playing old jazz. The world finally felt like it could breathe. Again, Sloane stood barefoot in the living room. She wore one of Gavin's flannel shirts. Sleeves rolled, hair loosely braided. She wasn't checking emails. Wasn't rushing off to a board meeting. She was just here. She's been in there for 30 minutes, she whispered, sipping her coffee. That's concentration, Gavin replied, cracking eggs one-handed into the pan. It usually means something magical is happening, or she's feeding goldfish to the toaster again. Should we be worried? A little? A quiet ding came from the corner. Lena's voice called from behind her bedroom door. Dad, Sloane. You need to see this. They shared a look, eyebrows raised. Gavin wiped his hands on a towel and led the way. Sloane followed with her mug still in hand. Inside, Lena sat at the edge of Gavin's old desktop, her eyes wide with mischief. On the screen, the game Gavin had built for her years ago, Lena's Labyrinth, a maze game, full of puzzles. An AI pet dragon named Sparks, but something was different. A glowing update available button blinked on the screen. What's this? Sloane asked. It's not for me, Lena whispered. Gavin chuckled. Actually, it is. He knelt beside her and clicked update. The screen faded. A loading bar appeared. Then, slowly, pixel by pixel, an animation began to play. It wasn't part of the original game. It started with a cartoon. Janitor sweeping a hallway under flickering lights. A tiny paper airplane flew in and tapped him on the back. He turned around to see a woman in a business suit holding a crumpled sketch of code. Sloane gasped. Is that? Keep watching, Gavin said quietly. The cartoon janitor took the paper, looked at it, and smiled. The music shifted, warm, hopeful. Then the animation zoomed out. A little girl burst onto the screen, riding a pixelated dragon. She scooped up both characters and flew them over a city skyline, trailing lines of binary like sparkles. As they landed on a rooftop beneath glowing stars, the screen faded to black. One line of text appeared. Dear Sloane, if you're reading this, press enter. Sloane's hand hovered over the keyboard. Her voice dropped to a whisper. This is really happening. You'll want to press it, Gavin said. She did. The screen lit up again, this time with a slow scroll of photos and drawings. Grainy security footage of Gavin sketching on the whiteboard. That first night. Lena holding a mug that read World's Best Dad. Sloane asleep on Gavin's shoulder during a late-night brainstorm. The three of them laughing over pancakes. Sticky fingers. Hair in tangles. Joy in the frame. Finally, more words filled the screen. You gave me back my voice. You saw the value in me before I knew how to show it. You didn't fix me. You walked beside me while I grew. So now, I'm asking, will you be part of our family forever? At that moment, Gavin stepped behind her. Quiet, steady. In his hand, a small open box with a gold ring. No diamonds. No sparkle. Just real. It's not perfect, he said softly. But neither are we, and that's what makes it good. Sloane's eyes welled. She turned slowly, looking at the ring, then at him. The man who once cleaned hallways with his head down, now standing tall beside her. You didn't just write a proposal, she whispered. No, he said. I wrote our story, and I want to keep writing it. With both of you. From the corner, Lena, arms crossed, eyebrow raised, added with perfect timing. Say yes, please. He can't cook alone. They all laughed. Tears and joy tangled together in the best kind of mess. Sloane took the ring and slid it onto her finger. Perfect fit. Yes, Gavin Brooks, she said, voice thick with feeling. Yes, 1,000 times. That evening, the three of them sat on the fire escape. The sun dipped behind the buildings. Gavin held Sloane's hand in one. Lena curled against his other side. The city buzzed below. But up here, everything was still. Sloane leaned her head on his shoulder. "What do we tell people?" she asked. "The truth," Gavin said. "That a janitor fell in love with a CEO. That a man who almost gave up met a woman brave enough to stay. And that a little girl with a toy dragon made it all happen." Lena chimed in, eyes still closed. "Exactly that," Gavin said. And for once, it didn't feel like a dream. It felt like home. Some stories don't end with applause. They end with pancakes, a flashlight under a blanket fort, and a little girl whispering, "Don't mess it up, Dad." Gavin's journey didn't lead him to a throne or a corner office. It led him to something far rarer, a life that felt like his, surrounded by people who finally saw him not as a janitor, but as the builder of something beautiful. The next morning, the apartment buzzed with quiet joy. Lena was already awake, sitting cross-legged under her blanket fort with a flashlight and a half-eaten banana. As Gavin walked in, she blinked up at him. "Did you tell her?" "Tell her what?" "That you like her. Like her." He chuckled. "Yeah, I think she figured it out." "And did she like you back?" "It's looking pretty promising." Lena grinned. "Good. I was worried you'd mess it up." "Thanks for the vote of confidence, kiddo." "You're welcome. Also, don't burn the pancakes. She might come over again." Gavin laughed, kissed her forehead, and turned off the light as she snuggled deeper into her blanket fortress. And just like that, the new day began. Not with a meeting, not with code, but with a simple truth. This was his life now, one he had built. Not to be accepted. Not to impress, but to feel like it finally fit. The city moved on outside. Deadlines, deals, deliveries. But inside apartment 3B, time moved slower. Because sometimes when you've spent years cleaning up after everyone else's mess, the most powerful thing you can do is sit still in something you've made yourself. Sloane didn't care that her inbox was overflowing. She sat barefoot in Gavin's kitchen, sipping too strong coffee and laughing as he flipped a lumpy pancake that stuck to the pan. "You really can't cook, can you?" she teased. "I told you, I don't cook. I serve with style." From the bedroom, Lena's voice echoed, "That's true. His eggs are weird, but he puts them on the plate like art." Sloane smiled. Gavin turned and looked at her, serious for just a second. "You still want this? Even with the sticky countertops?" "Especially with the sticky countertops." Later that afternoon, Lena dragged them both into her room. Her desktop was open again, the game still running. She pointed to the character of Sparks, the AI dragon that used to think it was a pigeon. "He doesn't hide anymore," she said. "He just flies." Gavin sat beside her. "You think that's because he knows he's a dragon now?" Lena shook her head. "No, I think it's because someone told him the truth and stayed around long enough to help him believe it." Sloane looked at Gavin. No words. Just that look. That one that said, "We're still writing this." Weeks passed, then months. Gavin's new title never changed. How he walked, still nodded at interns. Still carried his old notebook. Still wore Lena's sticker. On the back of his laptop, people noticed. Arthur would sometimes grin and say, "I knew it." Jason kept quiet, but no longer scowled when Gavin entered the room. And Sloane? She didn't flinch anymore when someone mentioned Gavin in meetings. She smiled, slightly, but every time. At the year-end presentation, Sloane stepped up first, talked about growth. Tech milestones, market wins. Then she cleared her throat. "And now," she said, "I want to bring up someone who reminds us all that brilliance doesn't always wear a badge." She paused. "Sometimes It carries a mop and a red marker. Gavin walked out, no notes in hand. He stood before the crowd, looked at Sloane Gott then. At Lena, sitting in the front row with her Galaxy hoodie and 2 thumbs up. "I didn't come here to change anyone's mind," he said. "I just came to make something work. And somewhere along the way, I found people who didn't just fix systems, they fixed me." He smiled. "And let me fix them too." The room clapped. But the applause wasn't what stayed with him. It was the quiet moment after, when Sloane reached for his hand, right there on stage. And didn't let go. That night, as the city settled outside their apartment window, Gavin tucked Lena in and turned off the lamp. She reached out in the dark and grabbed his hand. "You're happy, right?" He nodded. "I really am. And she's not leaving?" "No," he said gently. "She's staying." "Good," Lena whispered. "Now we just need to teach her how not to burn toast." Gavin laughed as he kissed her forehead. Outside, the city lights blinked, steady and patient, like they knew a new story had just begun. Not a fairy tale, not a rescue, just 3 imperfect people choosing each other, day after day, choice after choice. And in that quiet, sticky, beautiful truth, Gavin Brooks had finally found home.